Well, let's talk about this with Dr Ashok Kumar. He's an Associate Professor of Political Economy at Birkbeck University. Good morning to you, Ashok.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So do you agree with these business leaders?
Look, there's two ways that you can get growth. There's a way that Starmer suggested and business leaders have suggested, which is, optimize the conditions for investment, or there's wage-led growth, which they're not talking about. To optimize the conditions of investment, you need to see, like they suggest, you need to see unions stifled, wages falling, and that increases potential investment. The fact is that wages have fallen the most of any country in the G8 in Britain in the last 3 years. And we have the most restrictive trade union laws, especially since 2017 in the Trade Union Act, but also since 1987 in all of Western Europe, compared to the Western Europe. So if you say sort of a competitive advantage, will they invest in Western Europe or will they invest in Britain? We already outshine them when it comes to wage depression and restrictions on trade unions and the right to strike.
But well, look, we had wage suppression because we had mass uncontrolled immigration, and a lot of it coming from Eastern Europe in earlier days, long before other Western European countries.
Julia, that's ridiculous. To say that the wages have fallen here compared to Western Europe because of immigration. You can have your immigration criticisms, but that's not actually the case.
We had a situation where we opened up to Eastern European countries, and lots of people who came and worked very hard.
So did Germany. So did Germany and France.
No, they didn't open up for a number. I think about 5 years later they didn't open up until. So huge number of people had come to this country. There was clear wage suppression as a result of that. People settling here. Of course, we've also got the added bonus of people speaking often English as a second language in many of those Eastern European countries and coming to Britain. So that had been an issue, and of course we now have mass migration from other parts of the world as well, from our former colonies, again, where people often speak English. Now, but here's the thing. Trade unions have been able to, I had a conversation with a trade unionist yesterday, trade unions have been able to very easily, it would appear, go on strike again and again and again, repeatedly, in many different unions and many different industries and areas of work in the last couple of years. The terribly restrictive rules for unions didn't seem to stop those. So why is there an issue with that?
Listen, the International Labour Organization in the UN's core convention protects freedom of association as a human right.
Quite right.
We signed on to that. Freedom of association is the right to strike, the right to collectively bargain. So, yes, you're right. We don't have a law that bans the right to strike, but it's inarguable that we have the most restrictive rights to strike compared to the rest of Western Europe.
Are they unreasonable rights to strike, though?
They are, because
Why?
you have to reach a threshold that the rest of Europe doesn't have to reach.
Just because the rest of Europe does something doesn't make it the absolute most perfect way of doing anything.
No, Julia,
is it not reasonable?
Julia, you're talking about investment, and the way that you measure whether you've optimized the conditions for investment. You're jumping around all over the place. You're talking about immigration, you're talking about investment. I'm talking about if you're an investor and you're investing in Western Europe, or you're investing in America, or you're investing in Britain, you're looking at what are the conditions where we can profit the most. In order to profit the most, you need workers to make the least amount of money and have the least amount of rights.
No, you don't. No, that's not.
That's one way.
You just said that as if that was how you made a profit.
No.
That's not how many companies. Most companies in Britain actually don't operate on that basis. Actually, most of our most successful. No, that wasn't. You said that was how you make the profit.
No. I'm telling you, there's two ways.
We have some highly skilled businesses that sell high quality, luxury, niche products, and those people who work in those businesses are not low paid.
Julia, you said, how do you ensure growth? There's two ways to ensure growth. There's investment and there's wage-led growth. Investment, you have to optimize the conditions for investment so that people say, okay, we're going to profit here, so you invest there. That's why China saw an enormous amount of investment since 2005, because the wages were very low, it was optimum conditions for investment. Or you could have wage-led growth, where you say people make more money, they spend more money in the economy, and that leads to more growth.
Wage-led growth also leads to inflation if it's not based on actually growth in the economy and productivity. Now, we've seen, have we not, again and again, in many industries, but particularly also in the public sector, we haven't seen that productivity growth. We can't have people earning a load more money spending a load more money when we haven't actually produced anything more. We haven't actually got it. That's just printing money. That creates inflation. And as we've seen the last couple of years, that always hurts the poorest people first. I want to come back to the question about the restrictive rules on strikes and things. We've got a lot of rights in this country. You know, you get your sick leave, your pension rights, your paternity leave, and all of that. We've also got rules, stopping people from being sacked because they're gay or they're black, and being able to go to tribunal if they've been treated unfairly by their boss.
We agree with that.
Okay. Why wouldn't a civilised human being agree with all of that, for goodness sake? So here's the thing. But when it comes to people being able to sort of accumulate and acquire those sort of workers' rights immediately, and therefore businesses go, well, I don't know if I hire somebody, I might be stuck with someone who was really good at an interview, might have done the 2-week probation period just fine, and actually after that becomes a slacker, because my God, I've seen enough of that in offices I've worked in. I then can't get rid of them in the first year because I'm now stuck going through a tribunal. Or the situation where people can go on strike, but there isn't a requirement that a minimum percentage of people who are members of that union working in that industry actually agree with that strike. None of this seems to me to be unreasonable.
Well, look, I think that the point isn't about whether this is reasonable or unreasonable. The point is how is it relative? Well, it's about how is it relative to other countries, and it's about whether that leads to investment or disinvestment. And on your point of whether this will lead, whether wage growth in the public sector leads to inflation, in the last few years, none of that has led to inflation. And the reason why we have inflation is because of exogenous factors, not because of wage growth.
I know, but you talked about wage growth as a way of growing an economy. That's not a way to grow an economy. You need output to grow, and wages will follow.
Well, you can have output, but you can also have demand. So you have underconsumption. Right now, people aren't spending money because they don't have as much money, expendable income. If you give people more expendable income, not just in the top section of society, but across the society, then people spend more. I mean,
and prices will go up if we're not producing more. You talk about how we need to get growth and get inward investment. Again, Britain has actually done very well on investment from overseas, actually, compared to lots of countries in Europe. You know, the country that gets lots of investment, it's Ireland, because basically they've said we're kind of a tax haven. We're going to give very, very, very favourable rates to any multi-billionaires, big multinational corporations. Presumably, if you think investment and getting that is the most important thing, you'd be in favour of doing that as well here in Britain.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways that you can tax people on assets that doesn't have to tax corporations. I think it does lead to disinvestment if you increase corporation tax. But if you tax assets, if you increase capital gains tax, for example, if you tax things that are immovable, not fluid capital, but immovable capital, it means that you can lead to more investment. And
no, it doesn't. We know what happens then. We know that rich people leave. The thing about very rich people, if they put your or my taxes up, we're still going to stay here. We're not going to up sticks and move to Dubai or the Cayman Islands or Monaco or whatever. They don't want us. We don't want to move there. I mean, maybe the Cayman Islands, I don't know. But very, very rich people are incredibly mobile. And they will
maybe extremely rich people, but most rich people don't actually move, especially if you tax assets. If you tax assets, they're not moving. If you look at places that have higher taxes on assets, they're not picking up all their immovable assets and moving to other countries. Yes, the tiny sliver at the upper, creamiest layer of society might move, but the vast majority of rich people, the top 1%, don't actually.
Isn't it better just to create a bigger pie rather than try and tax more of the existing pie?
Well, this is what Labor's saying. They're saying, oh, we'll just pay for everything by ensuring growth. What about actually having investment directly by the state? That needs to actually happen now, rather than just building incentives for people to invest. Whereas people just might not invest in the real economy, Julia. You can create tax breaks for the rich, and they just move that into accounts and get more zeros in a Cayman Island bank account. They don't actually have interest in necessarily investing in the real economy.
Okay.
The state can tax and invest directly into the real economy and grow the economy. And there's a history of the 20th century that proves that.
Well, spending money on infrastructure, but I'm not entirely sure the state is always the best decider on where businesses and where the economy should flourish. I don't think they've got the strongest track record on that. We'll have to leave it there. Always so good to talk to you, Dr Ashok Kumar from Birkbeck University.